Okay, continuing on with theme 4C, this time I'm going to look at Easter and how that differs between the Eastern Orthodox Church and Western churches, such as Catholics and Protestants. So, as I've said before, this AC requires you to be able to compare and contrast the different practices regarding Easter between the West and the Eastern Orthodox churches. I think it's really true to say that Easter is the most important of all Christian festivals. It celebrates the resurrection of Jesus, which we know is the foundation of Christian belief. Without the resurrection, there is nothing. Here you go, Paul backs it up in 1 Corinthians 15:14. And if Christ had not been raised, then our proclamation has been in vain, and your faith has been in vain. So no resurrection, no Christianity. Although it should be pointed out that the term Easter probably derives from the term Iostra, which was the Anglo-Saxon goddess of spring. So Easter has its roots in a pagan festival that celebrates the rebirth of nature. And it's a movable feast. And what we mean by movable feast is that in most years it's celebrated on different dates in Western and Eastern Orthodox churches. And this is because the East and the West disagree on how the calculation of the date of Easter is interpreted. So we're going to have a bash at looking at how this is worked out. It's quite complex. Hopefully I'll explain it well to you. So the date of Easter. So all Christians agree on the basic formula for the date of Easter, which is that it's on the first Sunday after the first full moon on or after the vernal equinox, so the spring equinox. Right. It's a movable feast because it will take place at a different time each year because of the looking for the full moon. So why the disagreement? Right. Now, as we saw on Christmas, the Eastern churches use the Julian calendar, whereas the Western churches use the Gregorian calendar. So there's that 13-day difference sitting between the two of them. However, the Eastern and Western churches define this vernal equinox, remember the first Sunday after the first full moon on or after the vernal equinox, and full moon differently. So not only are they using a different calendar, they have a different definition for what they define as vernal equinox. So in the West, we have the vernal equinox on a fixed date, which is the 21st of March. But the point at which day and night are at equal lengths, this is the vernal equinox, when the sun is exactly above the equator, actually can range between the 19th and the 22nd of March. So in the West, we just say it's fixed on the 21st of March, but in the East, they go with it almost as if it is the proper equinox. So it's on the 19th, it's on the 19th, it's on the 22nd, it's on the 22nd, or the 20th, 21st, it totally depends. Okay. Also, to complicate matters further, the Western Church doesn't use the astronomical full moon, but an ecclesiastical full moon, which is determined by tables created by the Church. So, in other words, so they can determine it in advance. So that further complicates the issue. And also, the Eastern Church stipulates that Easter must fall after the Jewish Passover, because in the Bible, the resurrection of Jesus took place after he came into Jerusalem to celebrate the Passover. In the West, Easter Sunday can occur before the Jewish Passover. So if you look at this table of dates of Easter from 2001 to 2021, and here you've got when we've got the spring full moon, when there's the astronomical Easter, the Gregorian Easter, the Julian Easter, and the Jewish Passover. What you can see here, particularly 2016 is an interesting year. You can see that in the West, Easter was celebrated on the 27th of March, but in the East, it was on the 1st of May, so substantially later, and that's because Passover fell on the 23rd of April. So the East had to wait till Passover in order to celebrate Easter. So over a month's difference in the celebrations of Easter. And you can have a look over that chart and see how things differed year in, year out. in general, there isn't a massive amount of difference. So, for instance, in 2001, Easter fell on exactly the same day. 2004, exactly the same day. 2007, exactly the same day. 2010, exactly the same day. So you can see there is some similarities here, but at the same time there can be some massive differences, all linked to the Passover, etc., etc. So let's look at the Western Church to start off with. So the run up to Easter is a 40-day period called Lent, and it's linked to Jesus's period of 40 days in the wilderness prior to his public ministry. And you can read about that in Matthew chapter 4, verses 1 to 11. And Christians in general take this time as for spiritual development. And Lent for Western churches begins on Ash Wednesday. Ash Wednesday is so named because the ashes created from the palm branches used on the previous Sunday, which is Palm Sunday. Here you've got some people celebrating Palm Sunday, carrying their palms, are placed on the foreheads of recipients in the shape of a cross as a reminder of mortality, and people are asked to repent of their sins on Ash Wednesday. So in the West, Lent begins on Ash Wednesday. During Lent, many Christians will fast, either literally or figuratively, so that they develop their spiritual discipline. And this could be include giving up certain luxuries. Some people give up alcohol. Some people give up certain. In some monasteries, they won't eat red meat at all, and only eat fish, certainly, and that will only be on a Friday. So things do differ. So you hear of people giving stuff up for Lent, and that's linked to this idea of fasting. Generally in the church, flowers are removed, religious symbols may be covered, and the liturgical season, the colours you'll see are purple. Okay, and that's linked to the soldiers mocking Jesus by making him wear purple, which was in Rome the colour of royalty. So you'll see people wearing royalty. However, on the fourth Sunday, the halfway point of the seasons, we have, it's called Laetare, which means Latin for rejoice. So just as in the Christmas run-up in Advent, Gaudete Sunday in Advent, priests can wear rose-coloured vestments. So there you've got the difference between Laetare Sunday and normal vestments in Lent. So it's a day of relaxation, Laetare, of the normal Lenten fasting. Easter's finally in view. It's also become known in many churches as Mothering Sunday, which has its origin in the 16th century celebration of the Mother Church. It's had a slightly different spin on it now. So Mothering Sunday tends to fall on Laetare Sunday. The fifth Sunday is known as Passion Sunday. It marks the 2-week period known as Passiontide, which ends on Holy Saturday, the day before Easter Day. And in Roman Catholic and many higher Anglo-Catholic churches, this is when all crucifixes and images are veiled. And you can see that in the pictures here. Again, veiled in purple, that traditional colour of Lent. The sixth Sunday is Palm Sunday, which is the beginning of Holy Week. Final week of Lent, immediately before Easter, commemorates Jesus' entry into Jerusalem, during which people laid palm branches down before him to indicate his high status. And the Thursday of Holy Week is called Maunday Thursday. Holy Week, obviously, the week right up before Easter, which is a time of remembering the Last Supper of Jesus with his disciples. Maunday is from the Latin commandment, so that's a time when Christians remember Jesus' commandment to serve one another in the washing of feet, and you can read about that story in John chapter 13. And Good Friday follows, which is where Christians remember the crucifixion, death and burial of Jesus, and this is the Christian Day of Atonement, and it's come off the bottom there, but that's theme 2C, I think, where we've looked at atonement. So Good Friday, obviously the day which is remembering Jesus' crucifixion, usually involves a solemn and quiet service where the events leading up to the death of Jesus are remembered. In the Roman Catholic Church and many other churches as well, there's no Mass, no Eucharist, and a special service called Stations of the Cross may be used. And congregants there remember scenes or images of Jesus' last hours. And sometimes this involves looking at images or walking around the church or churchyard to gaze at art, drawings or sculptures that display these moments. If you go into a Roman Catholic church, usually the Stations of the Cross are pictured around the outside of the church. Many Anglican churches have a tradition of having a 3 hours devotion service, which is a sequence of meditations and music. So again, quiet time to concentrate on the spiritual, the day when Jesus was crucified. If you're a Lutheran, you often have Tenebrae, which is the Latin for darkness. That's a service on Good Friday. It's a candlelit service in which the Passion narratives are read. And I've got some pictures of all of these for you on the next slide. And on the Saturday night before Easter, many churches have a vigil. A vigil is a period of staying awake to keep watch and prayer. So if we go on to my next slide, there you can see the various Stations of the Cross, which tell the story of Jesus' crucifixion, etc. And you'll see those usually around Catholic churches. Here you've got, that is Tenebrae in a Lutheran church, and that is a candlelit service in the Philippines. Lots of people there. That's a vigil there prior to Easter Sunday. When we get to Easter Day, in the Western Church, very joyous celebration of Christ's resurrection. It's stark contrast to the solemnity of Lent. The liturgical colours change from purple to white, often gold. The churches are brightly coloured with yellow, white flowers. Music's joyful, and there's a jubilant use of church bells. And there you can see some brightly decorated churches on Easter Day. If we now move over to the Lent in the Eastern Church, again, some similarities and indeed some differences as well. So in the Eastern Church, remembering Christmas, the run-up to Christmas, Advent was a time of fasting in the Eastern Church. It's also the run-up to Easter. Lent is also a big time of fasting for the Eastern Orthodox Church. So it's the most important piece of fasting of the church year. It's called the Great Lent or Great Fast. And so Great Lent itself is preceded by 3 days of preparation, and like the West is followed by Holy Week. But Lent doesn't start on Ash Wednesday, but it starts on a day called Clean Monday. And this is a clean week, which is about spiritual cleansing of Christians. So if you go to the Greek Orthodox Church, Clean Monday involves having very quite plain food, fish, bread, hummus, olives, and kite flying is encouraged on Clean Monday. So on the Sunday night prior to Clean Monday, there's a special service which involves asking for forgiveness so that Christians can begin the Lenten season with a clean conscience and strict fasting for the first week. So quite straightforward there. And then the second week in the Eastern Church commemorates St. Gregory Palamas, who was a great saint of the Orthodox Church. There he is there. The third Sunday is the midpoint of the Great Fast. There's a special service where the cross is revered. There's an all-night vigil. The cross is brought out by a priest to the centre of the church, and the fourth week continues this veneration. The Saturday of the fifth week is dedicated to the Theotokos, the Mother of God, Greek word for Mother of God, and is known as Akathist Saturday, which is the Greek for not sitting, because a hymn is sung to Mary with everyone standing, and that is a picture there of Akathist Saturday. And then the Great Lent ends with Vespers on the Friday of the sixth week, followed by Lazarus Sunday, which recalls the resuscitation of Lazarus as foreshadowing the resurrection of Jesus. And you can read the story of Lazarus in John chapter 11, I think it is. Right, when we get to Holy Week, the run up to Easter Day, Holy Week services begin on the night of Palm Sunday. The blessings of Palms takes place at Matins on Sunday morning. During Holy Week, each day has its own theme in the Eastern Orthodox Church. So we start with the Monday, Holy and Great Monday, where the Patriarch Joseph, as a prototype of Christ, is venerated, and Jesus, well, they remember Jesus cursing the fig tree. Holy and Great Tuesday, you get the parables of the 10 virgins and the talents. Holy and Great Wednesday celebrates the anointing of Jesus. Holy and Great Thursday, Eastern Christians celebrate the founding of the Eucharist, because obviously that's equivalent to Maundy Thursday, Last Supper, etc. Here you've got the start of it all with Palm Sunday. We then move on to Holy and Great Friday, which would be the Western equivalent of Good Friday. So again, a day of strict fasting with services held in the morning, afternoon and evening. They're very solemn services that remember the sinful behaviour that Jesus had to endure. The evening service focuses on Mary's pain and the lament over the death of her son. In the Gospel story, we read that Jesus is removed from the cross and wrapped in a cloth by Joseph of Arimathea. In Eastern Orthodox churches, this cloth, which is called an epitaphios, on which an image of Jesus is painted, is carried around the church and placed in the tomb, and the tomb is then sprinkled with rose water and fresh rose petals. So you can see there the epitaphios being processed around the Orthodox Church. Slightly different one there, with again a huge procession of people covered in flowers and roses, fresh rose petals. When we get to Holy and Great Saturday, another day of strict fasting to remember Jesus' burial and descent into hell. There's a shift from sorrow to hope, as in the morning the liturgical colour is black but changes to white just before the Gospel readings, so somewhat similar to what happens on Easter Day in the West. And the priest sprinkles the church with fresh bay leaves to symbolise Jesus' victory over death. However, the church only announces the good news of Easter message in the Paschal vigil, so there's another vigil to come. So we move to the Paschal vigil. So late in the evening on Saturday, just before Easter Sunday, in the East, the congregants gather for the midnight office. This is the last service in Lent. So the epitaphios is placed on the altar, that picture of Jesus is placed on the altar, where it remains until the Feast of the Ascension, so when Jesus ascends back up to heaven. When all that's done, when all this has happened, at the end of the office, all of the candles and lights are extinguished, and everyone waits in silence until the stroke of midnight. And when they hit the stroke of midnight, the resurrection is then announced. And that's followed by a candlelit ceremony. So the priest lights a single candle, then passes this light on to his assistants, who in turn light candles of everyone in the congregation. So that's what you're seeing on the top right here, and you can just see the epitaphios there as well on the altar. Everyone then progresses around the congregation, saying, "At thy resurrection, O Christ our Saviour, the angels in heaven sing, enable us who are on earth to glorify thee in purity of heart." And the procession halts in front of the closed doors of the church, where the priest makes the sign of the cross, church bells and percussion instruments are sounded, and another Easter service begins. When we get to Easter Day, Paschal is basically Easter. Paschal eggs and baskets of food may be blessed by the priest, and there may be a feast. So here you see an Orthodox priest blessing with holy water the Easter food, which is eggs and cakes, etc. It's also customary to crack open hard-boiled eggs dyed red, there they are, to symbolise the blood of Christ, to celebrate the opening of Jesus' tomb. On Easter Sunday afternoon, there'll be sung Vespers. The Gospel of John may be read in different languages to symbolise that Christians believe the resurrection is important for the whole world. And Easter week is known as Bright Week, so no fasting, and many Christians use the customary Easter greeting, "Christ is risen," and to which you respond, "He is risen indeed." And in some countries, certainly in Russia, Ukraine, there will be festive processions like we saw in Christmas. And there is an example of an extremely big festive procession. So that is Easter in the West and the East. Hopefully you've seen lots of similarities and lots of differences.